hide those. All right. All right, I'm pulling up something that I thought I had put on here, but I didn't. All right. Drag this over. We're going to read this really quick before we begin. And I want you to keep this in the back of your mind, okay? All right. So, this is 2 Peter 3. All right. And I'll zoom in a little bit so it's a little easier to read. We're going to start at verse 13. Right? But according to his promise, we wait for a renewed heaven and renewed earth in which righteousness dwells. So then, beloved ones, looking forward to this, do your utmost to be found by him in peace, spotless and blameless, and reckon the patience of our master as deliverance. So as our beloved brother Paul, Shaul, wrote unto you according to the wisdom given to him, as also in all his letters. So at the time, Peter knows that Paul went around, went to different congregations, went to different places, towns, cities, islands, and then after that, he wrote letters to them. So he's speaking, right? We do this and we say, okay, put it in context. What is Peter saying directly about the wisdom that is inside Paul's letters? Speaking in them concerning these matters. What matters, right? If we come back up and we look at what he is discussing, which we studied this a while ago before we did Enoch. We went over Peter. But if you come back, go back through when you have time, reread 2 Peter chapter 3. Okay? Because what he's talking about is being set apart in behavior and reverence, the kind of people that are set apart in behavior. That's an important word right there. Reverence, waiting for the return of the master, the promise of a renewed heaven, a renewed earth, where righteousness, what do you mean by this, right? Righteousness dwells. He said, so in Paul's letters, speaking about these matters, what matters? All these matters we just said earlier, and then some. Read 2 Peter 3 to know. In which some are hard to understand, which those who are untaught and unstable twist to their own destruction, as they also do to the other scriptures. So, Peter warns us that all of this stuff that he talks of and Paul speaks of is hard to understand to those who are untaught and unstable. Remember this word untaught. Okay? They twist the words of the scriptures to their own destruction, and others follow them. Right? So they're sitting here saying what the word doesn't say, telling people what the word doesn't mean, and they're typically doing it for self gain, right? Not selfish or not selflessness, but selfishness, right? And we're going to read because Paul's going to speak directly about these people. So that's why I open up with this, right? If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of the Father, who gives it all, right? Gives it to all generously without reproach, and it will be given unto him. But he should ask in belief. We talked about this, right? Hebrews 11. What does it mean to believe? Not doubting, for he who doubts is like a wave of the sea driven and tossed by the wind. Me and Zuki were having this conversation this morning, and Waves do not exist without the wind. Yeah, you could have like an explosion or some kind of like vibration that would create waves. So yes, not the only way for a wave to exist, but the waves we know them is the wind is driving the wave, meaning the wave, when it comes to the wind, is helpless. Nothing it can do. It just must bend to the waves. So when we ask for wisdom, we should ask in belief, not in doubting, because we don't want to just be tossed around by the ways of the world, right? So I don't know why it doesn't. Sorry, the normal spot I click was not clicking over. All right, so here we go. 1 Timothy. This is chapter 1. I don't know why I didn't put that chapter there, but 1 Timothy 1. Give you a second to flip there if you have it. 1 Timothy 1. All right. And I remember we asked ourselves a question and we're going to ask ourselves a question again, but you have to we need ground rules. When we're reading scripture, we need ground rules. If you say Yeshua is the Messiah and he is the son of Elohim, then he is the Messiah and the son of Elohim in the book of Exodus, in the book of Judges, in the book of Malachi, in the book of Paul, or any writing letter of Paul. If we say he's the Messiah and he is the Son of the Most High, then he is the Messiah and the Son of the Most High. And that truth has to fit throughout all of Scripture. And if it doesn't, then there's two things. Something changed or it was wrong. Okay, so remember that, right? We need those ground rules. So, again, ground rules of Paul, right? This is Paul's letter to Timothy. Right? It says, now, the goal of this command is love from a clean heart. Right? That reference would be Psalm 51, David. From a good conscience and sincere belief, which some, having missed the goal or missed the mark, turned aside to senseless talk, wishing to be teachers of Torah, understanding neither what they say nor concerning what they strongly affirm. So think about what Peter said. They are unstable and untaught, and they twist the scriptures to their own destruction. Paul is saying, hey, there are some who have missed the mark. They've turned their ear to senseless talk. They want to be teachers of the Torah, but they don't understand what they say, let alone what they are forcing or confirming or affirming upon others. And then, if you don't have it highlighted, I would highlight this in your Bible because this is very, very important. 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 8. And we know, this is Paul speaking to Timothy, and we know that the Torah is good if one uses it legitimately. So we have to ask ourselves, right? Because we are about to get into arguably 3 chapters of Galatians that if you're not in the right context, you'll go, I don't need to get circumcised. I don't need to follow the law. And if I do get circumcised, then I'm forsaking the Messiah? That sounds scary. I don't want any part of anything where I could be forsaking the Messiah. But remember, we have to set the ground rules. So either these things are good and applicable to our life throughout all of time, or something changed. And if something changed, we are in a world of hurt because the all perfect, all knowing, never changing, right? As James says, without a shadow of variation, the Father of lights. Right? So the ground rules. Verse 9, knowing this, knowing what? That the Torah is good if it's used legitimately. Remember this conversation. This is going to play big later on. It says, knowing this, that the Torah is not laid down for being righteous, but for the lawless and unruly, for the wicked, for sinners, for wrongdoers, profane, for those who kill their fathers or mothers, murderers, and those who whore, for sodomites, kidnappers, liars, perjurers, and for whatever else is contrary to sound teaching. So, what is Paul telling Timothy, right? What is Paul telling Timothy? He's saying, hey, pay attention. We are keeping these commands from love, having a clean heart, a good conscience, and sincere belief. Right? He's not saying, hey, we're keeping these commands because a man told us this was important. He's saying, we love the master. Our heart is clean. We are doing this from a good conscience. We're not just doing it for some reason. We're not doing it for a benefit or a gain. We're doing it because of sincere belief. But there are those who have missed the mark. They have turned to senseless talk. They want to be teachers of the Torah and the word. They do not understand what they say. They do not understand what they affirm. And those are talking about how the Torah is being used incorrectly. Those people, he says, we know the Torah is good if it's used legitimately, but these people, they are not using it legitimately. And how does it use legitimately? Well, it's laid down not for the righteous, but the unrighteous or lawless. Remember, in 2 Peter, he said that there will be for the righteous. Let me pull it back up real quick. Right? Right here. Peter said, we wait for a renewed heaven and a renewed earth in which righteousness dwells. In which righteousness dwells. So, coming back to what Paul said, right? It's not for the righteous, but it's for the lawless, right? Think about all the movies where somebody's like, oh, I'm about to lay down the law. Well, that's obviously not being laid down for someone who is not breaking the law. That comment is strictly left for those who are breaking the law. Oh, I'm about to lay down the law. I'm about to tell them how it is. They are not doing how you're supposed to do it. They do not know. I'm going to lay it down for them. So, back to our original question we asked ourselves weeks ago. Is Paul preaching a different gospel? Remember, he warns about this. He said, if anyone comes to you speaking a different gospel or talking about proclaiming, promoting a different Messiah, even if it's from me, do not listen to these words, right? So is Paul preaching a different gospel? Does he represent a different God? So I said we talked about all of this because I want you to really ask these questions as we're reading, right? If somebody, think about this, right? If I text my wife, right, and I say, hey, I don't know what happened. I lost track of time and I forgot to turn the beans off and they boiled out and now they're gone for dinner, right? We don't have beans for dinner. So you got to make some when you get home. Well, say as I text her, she's texting somebody like a friend who just had a baby and she types in capital letters, congratulations, I'm so happy for you guys, and sends it. And then when she comes over to my text, for some reason, her phone decides to stay on capital letters. And she texts, are you serious? Well, when I read that message, I'm not going to read it as like, what? Are you kidding right now? Like, are you serious right now? I'm going to read that as she's mad at me. Right? So here's this situation happening where she's like excited for somebody having a baby. And then that carries over to our conversation. Well, when I take that out of context, I just think, oh, she must be mad at me because she took the time to capitalize her message to me. We're doing right. That's what we're doing right now. We're reading the words, right? We're reading a paper text message from a long time ago. So we don't have the facial expression, the excitement, the joy, the personal physical presence that we can feel out the words that and the situations that's happening. We just have to read about it. So if we don't take our time and we ask ourselves these questions, right? If I took the time to look back and see, oh, we're in a group message to this person, and Zuki just texted this group and said, oh my goodness, congratulations, I'm so happy for you guys. And I see that's in capital, and then I see that she texted me immediately after, I could make the safe assumption and go, well, it probably was just a fluke, right? But if I remove myself from that context, I can create a whole nother meaning. All right, so now we can finally get into Galatians. So we will we'll pick back up in Galatians 4. And we will be bouncing around a lot. All right, we'll be going Old Testament, New Testament, a lot of stuff today. All right. Galatians 4. And I say, for as long as the heir is a child, he is no different from a slave, though he is master of all, but he is under guardians and trustees until the time prearranged by his father. So we also, when we were children, were under the elementary matters of the world, being enslaved. But when the completion of the time came, Elohim sent forth his son, born of a woman, born under Torah, to redeem those who were under Torah, in order to receive the adoption as sons. Listen, the Father sent his son, born of a woman under Torah, to redeem those who were under the Torah, in order to receive the adoption as sons. The Jews, who Paul is saying are not considered sons. Think about that. Those under the Torah that are not sons, in order to receive adoption as sons. The only people at this time, when Yeshua comes, that will be considered under the Torah would be the Jews. So Yeshua goes to his people, right, who are under Torah, to receive them as adopted sons. Think about the controversy. What do they tell John at the immersion of Yeshua? What do they tell John? Right? We are sons of Abraham. And John laughs at them and says, what? The Father could turn those rocks into Abraham's sons if he so felt it. It means nothing. Why would John tell the Pharisees that it means nothing to be a physical lineage, genealogy son of Abraham, right? Maybe John and Paul are kind of on the same path when saying the genealogy that you can trace back is not that important. And he's going to go into this much more, right? So, verse 6, and because you are sons, Elohim has sent forth the Spirit, the Ruach of his Son, into your heart, crying, Abba, Father. You are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, also an heir of Elohim through Messiah. But then indeed, not knowing Elohim, you serve those which by nature are not mighty ones. But now after you have known Elohim, or rather are known by Elohim, we don't have that highlighted. I would highlight that part right there. You now know him, or rather are known by him. How do you turn against the weak and poor elementary matters, to which you wish to be enslaved again? You observe days and months and seasons and years. I fear for you, lest by any means I have labored in vain. Right? So Paul's recounting, he's saying, guys, a child is equivalent to a slave. Because although the child is master of all, they have no authority, they have no power until that prearranged time that their father finally says, okay, you can now have authority over this household. Think about that, right? So the slave, who is not a homeborn, and the child, who is born of the house, in some sense, are equal until the time when the father says, okay, now my son is mightier than all of those and has authority in this household. So when we're children, we are more worried about the elementary matters of the world, right? Like hot, don't touch, hot, don't touch. If you jump from there, you'll get hurt. If you drink this, it will hurt your tummy, right? Oh, you have a headache? Drink water, right? All of these things that are just common and normal to us that we don't have to worry about, right? A child, right? All the time. Our daughter, Selah, has a headache because she never drinks enough water. And it's always at the end of the day. And we always realize her cup is empty and she doesn't know where it's at. Well, us being adults, being like, I got to drink more water, I'm going to get a headache. Right? So he's saying that Yeshua, the Father sent Yeshua, born of a woman under Torah, to redeem those who were under the Torah, the Jews, in order that they will be considered adopted sons. Why? Because if we are sons, then the Messiah, if we are sons of the Father, right, we are children of the Most High, the Messiah will send his Spirit into our heart, and our heart will cry out to the Father. Then we will no longer be a slave, right, but we will be a son. And if we are a son, then we become an heir. And if we're an heir, we want to be an heir of the Father through the Messiah. Through the Messiah. That's the important part. We want to be heirs to the Father through his Son, the Messiah. And he's saying, hey, you guys knew these other gods, right? This is what you guys did. And you served these other gods. But now you've been introduced unto the real creator of heaven and earth. You've been introduced to the Father. And now you know him, or rather, now he knows you. So you know him, he knows you. We know this story. And you yet here are trying to turn back into these elementary matters. You would like to be enslaved again? Enslaved to what? Enslaved to the Torah or enslaved to man? Remember, Paul said the Torah is good if it's used legitimately. But when it's used incorrectly by untaught, unlearned, unwise people who allow senseless talk to enter their ears and go, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Those people are using it to enslave people, right? You observe days and months and seasons and years, for I fear lest by any means I have labored for you in vain. Paul, we see it through all of Paul's writings. He says, right? He must return to Jerusalem in some instances, and in others, he must do something in order to keep feasts. So the idea of saying that Paul says we don't have to worry about days, months, seasons, years is silly. When we put this into context about the people enslaving these people, which we're going to actually read a little bit about this later, I think we'll start to see and understand what's going on. Right? He says, I fear that I have labored in vain. All this work I've done, it's in one ear and out the other, right? It's useless. So we'll flip back to Exodus 21. Right? So we flip back to Exodus 21, and I'm going to start at verse 1. He says, and these are the ordinances which you will set before them. If you buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years he will serve you. And in the 7th year, he will go free for nothing. If he should have come in alone, he will go forth alone. And if his wife should have gone in with him together, his wife will also go out. Moreover, if the master give him a wife, and she has borne him sons and daughters, the wife and the children will be his master's, and he will go forth alone. All right? So we're talking about a indentured servant, a slave. Right? A slave. Verse 5. But if that slave or servant would answer and say, I love my master and wife and children, I will not go away free. So the servant loves the master of the house and chooses to remain in the house. Then, verse 6, his master will bring him to the judgment seat of Elohim. And then he will bring him to the doorpost. And his master will bore his ear through with an awl, and he will serve him forever. So, if the servant decides that he wants to remain in the house of the master because of his love for the master, he is brought forth to be declared right by the father, and then he is taken to the doorpost, and his ear is pierced through his ear, and his ear is nailed to the door. Now, obviously, he doesn't live on the door forever. The awl is removed from his door, but then his ear is pierced, and that is signifying that he is a free servant, right? So yes, he is not a landowner. He doesn't have this and that. He is a servant, but he serves of his own free will, meaning he is in no debt, right? Remember, if I couldn't pay you, or I was indebted to you, I could become your servant for the time that we deemed was equivalent to whatever debt in which I owed you. But in the 6th year, right, at the end of the 6th year, that 7th year, we are supposed to set him free, where the debt is cleared. Hey, I know you should have served me 9 years, but you've served me 6 honorably, and this year is the final year, right? You're free. If you came in with nothing, you leave with nothing. If you came in with a wife and family, you leave with your wife and family. If you came in and I gave you a woman and you guys have children, well, that woman is still my servant, and those children are still servants of this house. Remember, Abraham complains and says, my only heir is of my homeborn servant Eliezer. So when Abraham died, guess what? Eliezer, not a son, but a servant who chose to remain under Abraham, would have inherited everything. So this servant says, I would like to remain because I love my master. I love my new family that I didn't come in with. I do not want to go away free. So he is brought to the judgment seat of the Father. Then he's brought to the doorposts, and his ear is pierced. And then he ends up serving that house forever. So now we're going to flip forward to John 10. He says, truly, truly, this is Yeshua. Truly, truly, I say unto you, he who does not enter through the door into the sheepfold, but climbs up another way, that one is a thief and a robber. But he who enters through the door is the shepherd of the sheep. The doorkeeper opens for him, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, because they know his voice. And they will by no means follow a stranger. They do not give their ear to these senseless talks. They don't follow a stranger, but they flee from them, because they do not know the voice of strangers. Yeshua used this figure of speech, but they did not know what he had been saying unto them. Yeshua therefore said again, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear him. I am the door. Whoever enters through me, he will be saved, and will go in and out, and will go out to find pasture. The thief does not come except to steal, slaughter, and destroy. I have come that they might possess life, and that they will possess it beyond measure. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Means ever perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. But the hireling, not being a shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches the sheep and scatters them. Now the hireling flees because he's a hireling and he is not concerned about the sheep. Right? Yeshua is Yeshua is in charge, concerned, laying his life down for the sheep. But the hireling, the one who is just the day laborer, he doesn't care. The wolf comes and he's more worried about himself than protecting the sheep. 14, I am the good shepherd, and I know mine, and mine know me, even as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep, which I have, are not of this fold. I have to bring them as well, and they will hear my voice, and they will be one flock, one shepherd. Remember, Yeshua went to the Jews first. The disciples went to the Jews, those first, and then he went out to the nations, to sheep that are not of this fold, sheep that are not of the fold of the 12 tribes of Israel, the Goyim, the nations of Israel, of the world, right? This is Ezekiel 37, right? Verse 17. Because of this, the Father loves me because I lay down my life in order to receive it again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down myself. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to receive it again. This command I have received from my Father. So, side note, anybody that says, oh, the Jews killed him and all this other killed him, Yeshua allowed himself to be killed. And he raised himself up again because the Father gave him the authority to do that. This is why when he's speaking with Pilate, Pilate says, do you not know who you speak to, the authority I have over your life? And Yeshua says, you have nothing over me other than what the Father has given you. Right? Like, you don't even know you're a grain of sand on a beachfront. You have no idea what you're talking about. Right? You have no real power and authority because your power and authority comes from man, not from the Most High. All right, 19. Again, there came division among the Yehudim because of these words, and many of them said, he has a demon and is mad. Why do you listen to him? Let me guess. Those who allow themselves to senseless talk would have looked at Yeshua and said, this man is mad and possessed with a demon. Right? That's senseless talk right there. 21. Others said, these are not the words of one possessed by a demon. Is a demon able to open the eyes of the blind? That sounds like someone who is using their sense. That sounds like someone who is taking in information, making a judgment, fact checking, confirming, using truth, and saying, I might not understand what's going on, but I can tell you right now, he doesn't have no demons in him. Right? I might not know everything, but I can tell you right now, no. So, continuing John 10. And at that time, Hanukkah came to be in Jerusalem. We're going to cover this in just a second. It was winter. That should give you a context of when Hanukkah occurs. This plays into the beginning of the year not being on January 1st, but in fact being like it was today, right? Which is the first day of the new year, if you didn't know. So Happy New Year, right? But Hanukkah, when it occurs in the winter. And the Jews just had Hanukkah about a month and a half ago in the winter, right? says, and Yeshua was walking in the set apart place in the porch of Solomon. So the Yehudim surrounded him and said to him, how long do you keep us in suspense? If you're the Messiah, just say to us plainly. These men have been given over to such senseless talk that they can't even recognize the Messiah. They don't even understand all this stuff that he's done, right? And Yeshua 25, Yeshua says to them, I have told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name, they bear witness concerning me. But you do not believe, because you are not of my sheep. And as I said to you, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give them everlasting life, and they will by no means ever perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and my Father are one. I thought that was yeah, so for some reason right here, this shouldn't be there. It got like double copied. Right? Means ever perish, no one snatch in my hand. That one looks weird. But so when we look at this, right? You might, oh yeah, Yeshua was celebrating Hanukkah. It doesn't state that, okay? Two, it says it was during Hanukkah. And where is Yeshua? He's walking in the set apart place in the porch of Solomon. Right? So when we look, right, at the commands and what is to be kept and what isn't to be kept, what's to be set apart, we find feasts in Scripture where the Father tells us, right, these are the days which we set apart from all the other days. And then in Scripture, we find two feasts, Purim and Hanukkah. Now, if you want Hanukkah, you need to go to Maccabees. And if you want Purim, you go to the book of Esther. And what you'll find is that these two Jewish feasts are feasts made by men. These are not, it does not say, right? And Yahweh said, keep this day unto me as blah, 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 blah. That's not the case. The case is that people decide to keep these days as a celebration. One, when Esther speaks before the king and the Jews are not slaughtered, right? That's Purim. And then the second is Hanukkah, which is the Maccabean revolt against a corrupt, evil dictatorship. If you're a Jew, these days are just as important. Also, if you're a Jew and you are not of the Messiah, then you will be celebrating a day called Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year, which happened 6 months ago, 5 months ago, around the time of Sukkot, around the time of trumpets, right? They don't even celebrate trumpets really anymore. They celebrate Rosh Hashanah and they say it's a Jewish New Year. The Jews have altered and changed the importance of the feast. They've downplayed his days and upplayed their days. So when Paul says back here, you observe days and months and seasons and years, for I fear lest by any means I've labored for you in vain. Well then, what days and months and seasons and years do you think he's talking about? I don't know, maybe the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, where it begins halfway through the year? I mean, if you ask a Jew, hey, when is Sukkot? They'll say, the 7th day, the 15th month of the day you begin. And then you say, okay, when is your New Year? And they say, oh, the 7th month, the first day of the 7th month. So then, are you celebrating Sukkot on The first month, 15th day? No, the 7th month. Well, then how is your new year at the beginning of the 7th month? Right? This is senseless talks. These are so this it doesn't make sense. It contradicts itself. It's confusing. But this is what the Jews believed and this is what they passed. So when Paul is saying these people are trying to enslave you, remember, the Torah is good if it's used righteously, if it's used legitimately, but if it's used by those who don't understand things, those who give their ears to senseless talks, those who are untaught, unstable in their ways. All right, so here's the questions, right? Whose house do you serve? Are we serving the house of man or are we serving the house of the Most High? Right? And I think about like when you get, right, when somebody's like, you watch the cop shows or whatever, or FBI show, on whose authority are you here? And they're like, I come with the authority of this person, right? So Paul's asking, on whose authority are you commanding these people to do these things? Right? Yeshua comes to his own, right? Remember, he said, I come to my sheep of this fold, then I go to sheep that are not of this fold, right? He comes to his own, they reject him. Then he goes out into the Goyim, the nations. So is being born of the Father, right? Being born of the Father may make you a son, but refusing that role removes your inheritance. If my firstborn son has the birthright and he has the inheritance because he's the firstborn son, but if my son chooses to be a drunkard and a nuisance and sinful and evil before the eyes of Yahweh, I am to take him and remove him from our midst. You think that son is going to inherit anything if he doesn't choose to come back? Right? Do you think that son is deserving? Right? Hey, live the life you want to live, do whatever you want to do, then come back and I'll give you all this stuff to inherit. No. You're choosing not to be my son. So then my inheritance will go into the next. Right? And maybe that next is a servant. Because as we know, the servant can become a permanent member of the house if they love the owner, the master, and they choose to affix their ear to the door. So a servant, one not born of the tribes of Israel, right? A grafted in stick. Someone who chooses to serve the Most High and to serve the Son and loves the Master, loves the Father, the owner of the house, and by their actions and their belief, their sincere belief, they choose the Father, well, then they must have fixed their ear to the door. What did Yeshua say multiple times in the book of John? I am the door. I am the door. I am the door. So we fix our ears to the Master, Yeshua Messiah, because we've chosen him and the Father out of our love for the Father. So, my question, is it better to know or be known? Think of that. Oh yeah, I know everybody. Well, nobody knows you here, so you can't get in. But I know all those people in there. That's fine. None of them know you. You can know all these people, and it still is not going to get you in the door because none of these people know you. So is it better to know or be known? And like Paul says, right, being chosen by birthright or being chosen by the Spirit. Remember what Peter said in Acts? He said, guys, these Gentiles, they received the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, the same manner in which we received it. How can we not immerse them? How can we refuse immersion, baptism? It doesn't make any sense. These men were chosen, these men and women were chosen by the Spirit. Right? And Yeshua said, you got to be born of the Spirit. We're going to get there. So back into Galatians, right? Chapter 4, verse 12. He says, brothers, I beg you to become as I am. I beg you to become as I am. Well, what do you mean? What is Paul? Think about that. Highlight this and maybe put a question marker. Okay, well, how is Paul? What is he? What does he mean? Become as I am, right? Because I am as you are. You did not wrong me at all, but you know that through weakness of the flesh, I brought the good news to you before you. And my trial, which is in my flesh, did not despise or reject, but you received me as a messenger of the Father, as Yeshua Messiah. What then was your blessedness? For I bear you witness that if possible, you would have plucked your own eyes out and given them to me. So then, I've become your enemy, speaking truth to you? When I first came here, right? I'm going to pause. When I first came here, Paul's saying, guys, you would have plucked your own eyes out and given them to me just to hear what I was speaking. And now all of a sudden I'm your enemy? Right? And I want you to highlight 17 and 18 because this goes to the people we're talking about. He says, they are ardent towards you for no good, but they wish to shut you out, that you might be ardent towards them. And it is good always to be ardent in what is good, and not only when I am present with you. So, just because we're all adults, and we should all know all of the meanings of every word, but just in case it slipped our minds, being ardent is enthusiastic or passionate, right? A burning desire, right? Being ardent, being enthusiastic. So he's saying, right? Those people are being enthusiastic towards you, but it's not for a good reason. They wish to shut you out, so in hopes that you will be passionate towards them. A long time ago, and you can YouTube this after. A long time ago, there was a prevalent pastor and his wife. I don't remember who they were. I can't remember their names. I saw them years ago. And they're in a Jewish talk show. And he says, us Goyim will be lucky if we could eat the table scraps from a Jew. And his wife backs that up, saying, yes, we will be the best servants for the Jews when we enter heaven. So the Jews have, a mass amount of Jews, and they still teach it today, have convinced a large majority of Goyim, people of the nations, not of Jewish descent. And Jewish descent is not of your father. Conveniently, it's your mother must be Jewish. Doesn't matter about your father, which is a very funny thing. If your mother's Jewish, then you're technically Jewish. And if you're Jewish, you're going to have Goyim slaves, right? You're going to have Gentile slaves in heaven. But if you're not, right? If you're not, then you could have other issues, right? Because you chose some other path in life. So now you don't get to be some Jewish slave in heaven. This, Google it. Don't take my word for it. Check it out. You can see what they teach. So he's saying they are enthusiastic towards you, but not for a good reason. They want to destroy you. They want to shut you out in hopes that in the flip, this reverse psychology, that you will be passionate towards them. Oh, the Jews helped us. They saved us from our evil ways. And now we're just blessed to be here, right? Think of a servant, right? You're starving. You have no job, no food, no money, no what place, nowhere to live. Someone comes and says, hey, you can be my slave and you can live here. Well, that hungry person, that cold and tired and naked person is now full, has a bed, is clothed, has a job, is stable. They're going to look at me like, oh man, if it wasn't for you, you got me off the streets and you helped me. This is the mindset that Paul is warning. Hey, these people, They want you to think like this. They want you to act like this. They want you to be indebted to them. Remember that. They want you to be indebted to them. So, Paul is speaking about a group of people who do not know the Torah, do not know what it speaks of, do not care for sound teaching, do not know the Messiah, do not know the meaning of truth, do not have the Messiah, do not have the Father, do not have the Spirit. But they are commanding and teaching with an authority due to a birthright, self-proclaimed righteousness, and the approval of man. Remember, what does Paul say? I was taught at the feet of Gamaliel. Not, I was raised in the Torah. Not, I was brought up by the teachings of the Most High. I was taught at the feet of Gamaliel. The approval and the teaching and the stamp of a man. So, back to Galatians. Think of the group of people and think about what Paul is saying. He says, my little children, for whom I am again in birth pains until Messiah is formed in you. Even now I wish to be present with you and to change my voice, for I have doubts about you. So say to me, you who wish to be under Torah, do not hear the Torah. For it has been written that Abraham had two sons, one by a female and one by a free woman. A female servant, one by a free woman. These men who are not ardent towards you, right, who are ardent towards you, but not for a good reason, in hopes that you will be ardent towards them, right? In hopes that you'll end up saying, oh, actually, we want you to look at us and this is what you need to follow. This is what you need to do, right? These men are coming to the people that Paul went to, and they're teaching them the Talmud. In simple terms, they're teaching them tradition and teachings of men, so that those who are now new believers will eventually just obey the Jews. And I hate to say it, well, I don't hate to say it, but it's the truth. Look at our Christian government bending over backwards for every single thing that Israel needs. Oh, Israel needs this. Israel needs, it's our duty. Look at all these Mark Rubio and all of our government people going over to Israel, putting on kippas. A devout Catholic man, Mark Rubio, devout Catholic, goes over to Israel, puts a kippah on his head, and kisses a brick because some Jews told him to. And our Christian president, who doesn't believe he's ever done anything and needs to ask the Father for forgiveness, puts a kippah on his head and goes over and kisses a brick because Jews told him to. I'd love for you to go into the Torah and show me where it says that men must wear kippahs. I'd love to see that. It'd be great. So, all right, Galatians 4, I'm gonna kind of buzz through this just because we have a lot more to go. So, but he who was of the female servant was born according to the flesh. And he of the free woman through a promise. There goes that birthright, right? Are we saying because I am a son of Abraham or because I am the son of the Most High? Think about that. This is allegorical for these two covenants, one indeed from Mount Sinai, which brings forth slavery, which is Hagar. For this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia and corresponds to Jerusalem, which now is, and is in slavery with her children. But Jerusalem above is free, which is the mother of all of us. For it has been written, rejoice, O barren, you who do not bear. Break forth and shout, you who do not have birth pains. For the deserted one has many more children than she who has the husband. So, I want you to think about this. Paul is saying, we're all born, right? It says right here, but the Jerusalem, which is free, that is above, is the mother of all of us. But are we going to claim to be birthed in the flesh or in the spirit? Are we born to the flesh or are we born through the promise? Because if we're saying, hey, we're born through the flesh, we'll be missing the mark. And we're going to, when we go into John 3 and we look about Nicodemus and Yeshua's conversation, does that make a little more sense? So, 28. And we, brothers, as Yitzhak was, are children of the promise. Remember, what happens? Abraham and Sarah decide, well, I have no heir, and it must be Eliezer. And Sarah says, come, I'll give you unto Haggai, right? My handmaid. She will bear on my lap, and this child will be mine and yours, and this will be your heir. So that happens. And Ishmael comes. And the father says, hey, this heir will come of your seed. That was the promise. That is his promise. It's your seed through Sarah, not through the means of other beings, right? So Yitzhak is a child of a promise. Ishmael is a child of flesh, right? 29. But as he was born according to the flesh, then persecuted him born according to the spirit, so also now. Remember, Sarah sees Ishmael draw a bow back on Isaac with intent to hurt him. And Sarah says, hey, to Abraham, send this bondwoman away with her son, for our son will never be able to make it if this one's here. That is when the son of the flesh persecuted the son of the spirit. Right? 30. But what does the scripture say? Cast out the female servant and her son, for the son of the female servant shall by no means be heir with the son of the free woman. Therefore, brothers, we are not children of the female servant, but of the free woman. So Paul's saying, hey guys, we're not children of flesh, we're children of the spirit. We are born of the spirit, not born of the flesh. Sounds kind of reminiscent of somebody. Right? So, on whose authority again? So, what authority are you under? Who's the head of your authority? Can the Torah save you? Can the Master save you? When Yeshua walked the earth and he did things that men thought, well, you must be breaking the Torah. Was he actually breaking the Torah? Whose understanding of the Torah would you lean towards? Who understood the Torah better, Yeshua or the Pharisees? Are you a child of men, of the flesh, or a child of the Most High, a child born of spirit? Right? So in the question, why do we persecute those who are born of the spirit and not of the flesh? Right? So if you looked at these, right, whose authority? Well, we're under Yeshua's authority. Revelation tells us all authority, judgment has been handed over to the Son. Who's the head of that authority? The Father, right? Because the Father was the one who showed and described and created and instilled what authority is. Can the Torah save you? No. Can the Master save you? Yes. So when Yeshua is walking there doing things, was he breaking the Torah? No. Why? Because they didn't have an understanding of the Torah. They didn't even know what they were talking about. They didn't know what they were saying, nor what they were affirming. Remember, and I have the wheat in the background because remember, Yeshua's walking through the wheat and him and his disciples pick from the wheat and eat the grains. And they said, look, you guys are, one, collecting food on Sabbath. Whoa, right? And two, right? That wasn't really stated, but that's probably what they're thinking. But the big thing is that, oh, you guys are eating and you have not washed your hands. And Yeshua's like, man, that's a made-up law. That's a law of man. There's nowhere in the Torah where it says you got to wash your hands before you eat. Is it good practice? Yeah. Is it a requirement? No. To get to college, is it a requirement that you go to a physical high school? No. It is a requirement that you have a high school diploma or a GED equivalent? Yes. Do you need to go to school for 12 years in a public school in order to obtain either of those things? No. Can you? Yes. So there are good practices, and then there's also requirements, right? So whose understanding of the Torah should we be leaning towards? The Messiah's or man's? Well, we should lean towards Yeshua's understanding, right? Because who do you think understood it better? The Messiah or the Pharisees? Remember, Yeshua says, if your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees, meaning they were not doing it correctly. Because if you were doing it 100%, there's no way to exceed that, right? There's no way to exceed the maximum. That doesn't exist. People go, I'm going to give it 110%. No, you're not, because if you gave it 100, you'd be dead. And you could never give it over 100 because you'd be dead at 100. You'd given it all, which is your life. So if your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees, right? They had room, a lot of improvement room. So ask yourself, are you a child of men? Are you a child of the flesh? Or are you a child of the Most High? So why are we persecuting these men and women born of the Spirit, Luke, and not of the flesh, right? They're saying, well, my father is Abraham. Okay, that's great. And that's being born of the flesh. And guess what? My father's in heaven. I'm born of the Spirit. All right, here we go. Now we're going to get into the real workings of Galatians, right? All right, Galatians 5. In the freedom with which Messiah has made us free, stand firm. Then, and do not again be held with the yoke of slavery. See, I, Paul, say to you that if you become circumcised, Messiah will be of no use to you. And I witness again to every man being circumcised that he is a debtor to the entire Torah. You who are declared right by Torah have severed yourselves from Messiah and have fallen from favor. Now, 99.999% of the Christian world uses these verses right here to say, if you become circumcised, then you are enslaved to the Torah and you have severed your connection from the Messiah. All right, get Luke, bring him over here. So, at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves. Paul writes his letter to Timothy after this letter. So after this letter, he tells Timothy, if we do the Torah legitimately, it is good. Paul, we also read in Galatians previously that Paul is supporting of the circumcision of someone that is not circumcised. Later, we will read about Paul, who pays for two men to go through a vow of the Nazarite, which is found in the Torah. So, we really need to ask ourselves, okay, is Paul actually saying that we no longer need to be circumcised? Sorry, guys. I did not. Let me pull it up.
You're good. I heard you a few seconds before Matthew 5, but you're good. I've been reading.
Okay, sorry. Normally, all right, I'm gonna put this up on the other screen. All right. So, try to pay more attention. So, I guess just for the recording, because then we would have heard. So when we come back to just quick, when we come back here, the Yeshua is saying, beware of the teaching, right? Which I'm sure you guys all read this now in that silence. Beware of the teaching of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Beware of the teaching of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, right? And that's what he's talking about here in Matthew 16. And his disciples understand that. And he says, well, who do you guys say I am? And Simon, Peter, Caiaphas, he says, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living Elohim. And Yeshua looks at him and says, blessed are you, Simon of Jonah, son of Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this, but my Father in heaven did. So he's saying, hey, you didn't know this because of human teaching, that the only reason you knew this was because of the Spirit. Right? And we're just going to buzz past this because this last part doesn't, I mean, it matters. It all matters, but, right? So, Yeshua says, who am I? Peter says, you are the Messiah. He says, the only reason you know this is because my Father in heaven revealed this to you, no flesh and blood. And then seconds later, he looks at Caiaphas and says, get behind me, Hasatan. You are a stumbling block to me, for your thoughts are not of those of Elohim, but those of men. How did Peter just go from saying being praised by the master to then having Hasatan somehow speak through him? Think about that. Think about how that could have happened so quickly. All right. So back to Galatians 5. Pick up at verse 5. He says, for we in spirit, by belief, eagerly wait for the expectation of righteousness. For in Messiah Yeshua, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has strength, but belief working through love. So again, the Gentiles who are uncircumcised somehow get the Spirit, right, handed to them. And Peter's like, guys, we can't deny them immersion. We cannot deny them immersion because we see they have it. So in that moment, those uncircumcised men have the Ruach HaKodesh put upon them and are immersed. So that's why Paul's saying, whether you are from, whether you have, it doesn't, none of that stuff matters, right? Right? Like if somebody that was an evil person that did evil things is truly repented of their acts and has changed their ways, we don't look at them and say, well, 15 years ago, you were a terrible person. Right now, you're great. But 15 years ago, we don't worry about that, right? Because we can change. So we're not worried about what we weren't, what we once were, but we should now be worried about what we are now. Right? Verse 7. He says, you were running well. Who held you back from obeying the truth? That persuasion does not come from him who calls you. A little leaven leavens all the lump. Kind of funny that Paul is talking about, which we're going to cover this in next week's Passover study. Paul's talking about the leaven that leavens a whole lump. And Yeshua just warned his disciples, hey guys, watch out for the leaven of the Pharisees. Right? And they said, What do you mean? They got bad bread? And he said, the teachings of the Pharisees and Sadducees. And he's comparing them to leaven. So Paul is saying a little bit of a bad teaching can ruin everything. Your whole belief structure on some bad doctrine and bad beliefs and bad teachings can be corrupted. A little bad teaching destroys all of it. 10. I trust in you and the Master that you'll have no other mind, and he who is troubling you will bear his judgment, whoever he is. And brothers, if I still proclaim circumcision, why am I still persecuted? If I still proclaim circumcision. So, a couple verses ago, right? Paul says, well, if you get circumcised, right? Then you're indebted to the whole Torah. But then Paul in verse 11 says, I still proclaim circumcision. If I still proclaim it, why am I persecuted? Is Paul proclaiming circumcision so that you are declared right by the Torah? Or is Paul saying, be declared right by the Son, the Master, and everything else will fall into line after that? Then the stumbling block of the stake has been set aside, that those who disturb you would even cut themselves off. For you, brothers, have been called to freedom. Not only do not use freedom as an occasion for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the entire Torah is completed in this: you will love your neighbor as yourself. And if you bite and devour one another, beware lest you be consumed by one another. And I say, walk in the Spirit, and you will not accomplish the lusts of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh, and these are opposed to each other, that you do not do what you desire to do. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under Torah. And the works of the flesh are well known, which are these: adultery, whoring, uncleanness, indecency, idolatry, drug sorcery, hatred, quarrels, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambitions, dissensions, factions, envy, murder, drunkenness, wild parties, and the like, of which I forewarn you. Even as I also said before, that those who practice such as these will not inherit the reign of Elohim. You remember when he said those under the Torah, it's not for those who are righteous, but for those who murder and adultery, do this, that. And now he's comparing that, and he's saying that these are works of the flesh. 22. But the fruit of the Spirit's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, trustworthiness, gentleness, self-control. Against there is no such Torah. Think about that. If you're being led by the Spirit, you're not under Torah. Oh, that means if we're being led by the Holy Spirit, we don't have to keep the Torah. No, he's saying if you're led by the Spirit, then you have joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and trustworthiness and gentleness and self-control. And there is no law that's saying these things are bad. If you're not being led by the Spirit, then you will fall under the Torah. You will be doing these evil things, these bad things. Because you're not being led by the Spirit, you're being led by the flesh. If I'm being led by the flesh, I'm going to sin. If I'm being led by the Spirit, I'm not going to sin. It's simple. People take this and read it out of context. There's a saying. It says, blood is thicker than water. Right? We've talked about this a couple years ago. Blood is thicker than water. And everybody goes, yeah, exactly. So my brother who was born of my mother, my blood brother, that relationship is more important than water. Right? Which that's how everybody's always known it. Blood is thicker than water. And they just equate blood to being birth. Right? But if we look at the whole thing, it says that blood, the blood of the covenant, what is it? The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. That's what it is. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Well, hold on a minute. That is exact opposite of what we just thought. Blood is thicker than water. I should be more worried about my birth family than whatever. No, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Yeshua said, "Who is my mother, who are my brothers, and who are my sisters? Those who do the will of my Father in heaven. That is my mother, that is my brother, and that is my sister." So the blood of the covenant of the Messiah. So my brother in the Messiah is more than my brother who is born of the flesh. You see how now we can take all of Paul's writings and all of Paul's words, we just twist them and we say, oh, yeah, if you're being led by the Spirit, then you don't have to worry about the Torah. That's exact opposite of what Paul is saying. That's exactly the opposite of what Paul is saying. Said, 24, and those who are of Messiah have impaled the flesh with its passions and desires. Yeshua, John says, the wheat must die of itself and fall over. And only then, once it dies of itself and falls over, can it bear more fruit. Because when the wheat dies, it falls down, and the seeds in the wheat fall on the ground, hopefully go in and take root and bear more wheat. So, when we are of the Messiah, our flesh is impaled with him, so is the passions and the desires of the flesh. If we live in spirit, let us also walk in spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking to one another, envying one another. Right? So, is Paul really telling us that if we are led by the Spirit, that all of a sudden we somehow need to not worry about anything, not worry about any commands or any laws or anything like that? Is that all of a sudden now what Paul's telling us? Or is Paul saying, guys, if you're being led by the Spirit, you're just not going to do the wrong thing. Like the Spirit is not going to lead you to say, yeah, let's go kill that guy. Let's go murder that man. The Spirit is not going to say, yeah, let's go commit adultery. The Spirit is not going to say, yeah, let's go hate those people. Let's get a fit of rage because of our selfishness and let's go fight those people. The Spirit's not going to tell you to do that. And because the Spirit's not going to tell you to do that, you're not going to be punished under the Torah. You're not going to be under the Torah. Remember, under the law. If I get pulled over, the law must be laid down unto me because I'm under the law. I'm breaking the law. And I have now fallen under the law. But as long as I am being led by the Spirit or the speed limit sign, I know that if I'm going 35 miles an hour, that the cop's not going to pull me over. But if I do 55, I'm testing waters. I could or could not get pulled over. I could get in trouble. I could have repercussions for my actions. But if I'm obeying and I'm listening, then that's likely not to happen. All right, we are close. We have 11 slides left. I know it's been a lot, but I'd like to wrap up Galatians. So, Galatians chapter 6 says, brothers, if a man is overtaken in some trespass, you, the spiritual one, set such as one straight in spirit of meekness, looking at yourself, lest you be tried too. Paul just said, brothers, if you see a man who is sinning, and you being a spiritual one, you must set them straight in a spirit of meekness. So that when you look at yourself, you're not worried about being tried or tested too, right? Paul just said to judge people. That's exactly what he just said. But he said, you're doing it from a spirit of meekness, right? And here, just so we can do that. We'll bring this up over here, right? So what does meekness mean? Right? Submissiveness, right? Patient, long suffering, forbearance, resignation, gentleness, mildness, softness. So Paul's saying, guys, when you see one of your brothers doing the wrong thing, you should go to them in gentleness. You should go to them in patience, long suffering, forbearing, saying, hey, that's not, we shouldn't be doing those things, right? We shouldn't be doing those things. And we say it out of a place of love, sincere belief, a sincere love, kindness, gentleness, right? We don't go, are you kidding? You would be doing this. You got to be, are you serious right now? What do you think you're doing? Well, that's going to come out of a place of contention and hate and envy and not out of a place of love. Nobody's going to take well. Nobody takes well. I don't care who you are. If you did something wrong, someone's like, hey, so yesterday we were doing this thing and I saw you put this thing here, which kind of is fine, but in reality, it's not supposed to go here. And let me tell you why. If it goes here, well, this person who needs to get it in the morning, they can't reach it, and blah 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 blah. And there's this whole backstory, right? And now I told you, hey, I know that we're tall and we can put stuff on the top shelf, but the morning person that comes in to open up, right? We're closing this restaurant, we put the stuff on the top shelf. There's that short person, well, they can't get it. And there's no step stool in here, and they got to climb on the shelf, and it's super dangerous. So we put it down here. Not out of any standard or anything, but just out of love and care for our fellow worker, we do this. And if you care for that fellow worker, then you too will also do that thing, right? So Paul is saying, when you see somebody trespass, sin, you being a spiritual one, being led by the Spirit, you need to go set them straight, but you don't set them straight of, you got to be kidding me, right? You set them straight in love and meekness and kindness and gentleness. Because if we don't, we will consume one another, like he just said, right? In Galatians 5, we'll consume one another, right? It says, bear one's another burden so that, and so complete the Torah of Messiah. For if anyone thinks himself to be somebody when he is not, he deceives himself. Remember, he said those who are pretending to be ardent in you, so that in return, they'll deceive you, flip it, and you be ardent of them. Someone who thinks of himself as somebody, in reality, he's not. He's just lying to himself. Do not fall into the pit, right? Help one another with their burdens. So we ask again, right? Is this a new God, a new gospel, a different idea, a different teaching? Well, let's go back to Leviticus 19. Think about it. Remember when Yeshua said, guys, it's not that you harm your brother, it's that you thought about harming your brother, you've already sinned. And people go, oh, see, this stuff's not covered in the Torah. This stuff is not, this is new teaching that Jesus has brought unto us. Think about that. This is a common case. Right? Well, let's go back and let's just go back and let's read. Ready? He says in Leviticus 19, when you reap the harvest of your land, you will not complete the reaping of your field with exactness. You will not gather that which falls from your reaping, and you will not go over the gathering of your vineyard. Neither will you gather the remaining grapes of your vineyard. You will leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am Yahweh your Elohim. So he's saying, right, the corners, anything that fell, and anything that grows back, you don't go back and harvest it, right? Which I'll tell you is a good technique in a second too, right? So it's ready to harvest. I go through and I harvest. I leave the corners and anything that fell. The widow, the homeless, the orphan, all of them can come through your land and pick up anything that's on the ground and pick from the corners. They pick from the corners, they're not in the middle of your field, they're at the edges of your field. Right? And that is a way of taking care of them. Right? 11, you will not steal, you will not lie, neither will one bear false witness as an informer against his neighbor. You will not swear unjustly by my name. You will not profane the set apart name of your Elohim. I am Yahweh your Elohim. You will not injure your neighbor, neither do you rob him. Neither will the wages of a hireling remain with you until the morning. Right? Pay a man the labors and the wages for today for the day's work, not hold it in ransom. You will not revile the deaf, neither will you put a stumbling block in the way of the blind. And you will fear Yahweh your Elohim. I am Yahweh your Elohim. You will not act unjustly in judgment. You will not accept the person of poor, nor admire the person of the mighty. With justice, you will judge your neighbor. So it doesn't matter if they're poor or they're a powerful person, you will justly judge. Well, that guy's a poor guy, so it's okay if we throw him in jail. Well, this guy's a really rich guy and he's done a lot of good for the community. So we don't want to put him in jail, right? It's just like our Congress right now. They just voted 357 to 65 to not release any kind of allegations or active investigations into Congress members that deal with sexual assault or sexual harassment. Well, they're good guys. They're doing good for the people. Let's just turn a blind eye to their evil. So it doesn't matter their power or their position, their authority. What matters is that we justly judge. 16. You will not walk deceitfully among your people. How do you walk? Think about that. What is he saying? You will not walk deceitfully. Does that mean that he's walking? He's not actually walking. He's like running and he's saying he's walking. And everybody's like, man, how's that guy walk so fast? No, this is exactly what Yeshua talks about. You might look like you're doing good, but in reality, you know you're doing bad. You're walking. He says, walk in the spirit. Does that mean I have to have a spiritual body and I walk around in the heavens on water? No. It means my actions, my decisions, my mouth, my hand are something the Spirit would do. So it says, you will not walk deceitfully among your people. You will not rise up against the blood of your neighbor. I am Yahweh your Elohim. You will not hate your brother in your heart. You will not hate your brother in your heart. Didn't Yeshua say, if you wish hate upon your brother, you've already sinned against him? Well, here's the Torah. You will not hate your brother in your heart. You will in any wise rebuke your neighbor so that you will not bear sin against his account. And your hand will not avenge you, and you will not be angry with the children of your people, and you will love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Huh. Paul said what? Loving your neighbor. In Galatians 5, he talks about this, right? I'm back here in Galatians 5. He said, sorry. 14. For the entire Torah is completed in this word. You will love your neighbor as yourself. We just read that in Leviticus 19. That's where he's quoting. For if you bite and devour one another, beware lest you be consumed by one another. Walk in the Spirit. Do not walk deceitfully amongst each other, but you will love your neighbor as you love yourself. You will not hate your brother in your heart because you've already sinned. Think about this. Yeshua is not preaching a different kind of gospel and rule set. Paul's not preaching a different kind of gospel and rule set. So I ask again, is Paul preaching a different gospel or is he representing a different God? Because the God that we just saw in the book of Leviticus is the God that we just saw in the book of John. It's the God that we just saw in the book of Matthew. It's the God that we just saw in 2 Corinthians. It's the God that we just saw in 2 Peter. It's the God that we just read in Galatians 5 and Galatians 6. Right? So he says, Galatians 6:4, But let each one of you examine his own work. Then he will have boasting in himself alone and not another. For each one will bear his own burden. So, I'm going to go a little quicker now, but 2 Corinthians, Paul says in verse 9, so we also make it our aim to be well pleasing to him, whether being at home or being away from home. For we all have to appear before the judgment seat of Messiah. Remember, in the Torah, it said if my servant was good, I went to the judgment seat of Elohim. But because Paul understands that all authority and all power has been given over to the Son, he says, we will all appear before the judgment seat of the Messiah in order for each one to receive according to what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. Holy moly, Paul. Well, if the Torah no longer applies and we no longer need to worry about that, why are you telling us that we need to appear before the seat of the Messiah in order to judge according to our works? It says, according to what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. Remember, Paul equates the body and the flesh and sin as this. He equates patience, love, peace, kindness, meekness as of when we're walking in the Spirit. When we're walking in the body versus when we're walking in the Spirit. So back to Galatians 6, verse 6, he says, let him who is instructed in the word and share in all that is good with him who is instructing. Do not be led astray. Elohim is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. Remember, he just said, you're going to go in front of the judgment seat of the Messiah, according to all that you have done. So whatever a man sows, he'll reap. Because he who sows with his own flesh will reap corruption from the flesh. But he who sows in the Spirit will reap everlasting life from the Spirit. Let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due season we will reap if we grow weary. So then, as we have occasion, let us do good to all, especially to those who are of the household of belief. Remember, who are the people Paul's talking about? Are these people that care about the Messiah, or are these people who care about elevating themselves above other men? Verse 11. See, with big letters I have written you with my own hand. Now I want to just comment. This is a one long letter. This is not 6 chapters and 79 verses. This is a letter that Paul wrote to the church of Galatia. It's a letter. When we break it up into chapters and verses, it makes it easy for us to say, oh yeah, remember in chapter 3, verse 9? Versus, well, it's in Paul's letter to Galatians. It's about halfway through. It's like the 9th paragraph, right? That's where chapters and verses assist us. But in reality, this is one big thought. This is one big letter. And most of the time, these things should be read as such. Because when we read them and go, chapter 1, cool, wash my hands. 2 weeks later, chapter 2, we're probably going to lose a lot of the understanding we had in chapter 1. Unless we spent 2 weeks reading chapter 1 before we went to chapter 2. But, verse 12, as many as wish to make a good show in the flesh. Remember those men who were claiming to be ardent, but really wanted them to be ardent towards them? They are the ones who make to show in flesh. These are who compel you to be circumcised, only so that they should not be persecuted for the sake of the Messiah. Read that and read that again. As many as wish to make a good show in the flesh, these ones compel you to be circumcised, only so that they will not be persecuted for the sake of the Messiah. They are not saying you must be circumcised out of your love for the Father and the Son. They're saying you got to be circumcised so that we don't get hated for our persecution of the Messiah. They're literally bad guys pointing, they're thieves pointing at a murderer, saying, "Oh, look how bad that guy is. You guys should come over here. Yeah, we're good now. We should go to this thief school together. Let's go to this together and we'll learn how to be good." 13. For those who are circumcised, do not even watch over the Torah. Remember what he said. Those who do not, he wrote in his letter to Timothy, we're about to see it here. Those who do not understand, nor are taught, but they give to senseless time. They don't even understand what's in the Torah, let alone what they affirm. Those who are circumcised don't even watch over the Torah, but they wish to have you circumcised so that they will boast in your flesh. Oh, yeah, we circumcised. All these guys are following the Torah. They're following the law now. All these, oh, yeah, it's, well, because I went over and I taught them, hey, guys, this is the right thing. Now they're doing the right thing. That's what they're looking for. And then they're looking for them. Oh, well, I would have never known what was right had Rabbi Righteous not taught me these things, right? Oh, if it wasn't for this righteous rabbi man, he taught me all this, I would be lost. And Paul's like, how about let's give that praise to Yeshua and say, if it weren't for Yeshua, we wouldn't even know these things. If it weren't for the Father, I wouldn't even know the Messiah. And if it weren't for the Messiah, I would have no idea what it is to be like him, to look like him. So, was Paul contradicting the Torah? Was he telling us we don't need to be circumcised? Or was he telling us what's the reason for your circumcision? Paul doesn't contradict. I'm not saying don't get married. I'm saying make sure that marriage is happening for the right reasons. When my children get older, if I see that they look lustful in their marriage, I will tell them, I don't think you should get married. And if I look at my children and I see that there is true love and this is a decision that they've both come to and this is a good thing, then I will support the marriage. So Paul is not supporting us to keep the Torah so that we can be saved. Paul is supporting the Torah because we're doing it out of our love. When someone says sorry because they're forced to, it means nothing. When someone says sorry and they mean it because of their own accord, because they are sorry, then it means something. So was he teaching against it? Was he teaching a different good news? Was he teaching a different God? Were the people Paul speaks to of doing this for themselves or others? And what would Paul want for us today? Would Paul look at us today and tell us, guys, you live in a terrible, 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 evil world. You guys need to be on guard at every turn, at every glance, at every word. So, before we wrap it up, right, we have 3 left. Back to Timothy. The goal of this command is love from a clean heart, from a good conscience and sincere belief, which some, having missed the mark, turned aside to senseless talk. Wishing to be teachers of Torah, understanding neither what they say nor concerning what they strongly affirm. And we know that the Torah is good if one uses it legitimately. Knowing this, that the Torah is not laid down for a righteous being, but for the lawless and unruly, for the wicked as sinners, the wrongdoers, profane, those who kill their fathers and mothers, murderers, those who whore, sodomites, kidnappers, liars, perjurers, and whatever else is contrary to sound teaching, sound doctrine. So, Galatians 6. And for me, let it not be that I should boast except in the stake for our Master Yeshua Messiah. Paul's not boasting in these men or women doing these things. He's boasting in the Master, the praise of the Master, Yeshua Messiah, through whom the world has been impaled to me and I to the world. Right? We've died of the world. For the Messiah Yeshua, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has strength, but a renewed creature. And as many as walk according to this rule, peace, compassion be upon you and upon them, and upon the Israel of Elohim, the true nation of Israel of Elohim. From now on, let no one trouble me, For I bear in my body the scars of the Master Yeshua. The favor of our Master Yeshua Messiah be with you in spirit, brothers. Amen. So, when Paul is finishing up this letter to the Galatians, he's talking about a lot. He talked about a lot. He covered a lot. John 3. There was a man of the Pharisees, Nicodemus was his name, a ruler of the Yehudim, a teacher of teachers. And this one came to Yeshua by night and said, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher that's come from Elohim, for no one is able to do these signs you do if it is not that the Father is with him. And Yeshua answered and said, Truly, truly, I say unto you, unless one is born from above, he is unable to see the reign of Elohim, born of the Spirit. And Nicodemus says to him, How is a man able to be born when he's old? Is he able to enter his mother's womb a second time and be born? And Yeshua says, Truly, I say to you, unless one is born of... You can stick with me. Unless one is born of water and the Spirit, immersed, baptism, and born of the Spirit, given the Holy Spirit, he is unable to enter the reign of Elohim. That which has been born of the flesh is flesh, and that which has been born of the Spirit is spirit. Do not marvel at what I said to you, that you have been born from above. For the Spirit, the Ruach, breathes where it wishes. And you hear the sound of it, but you do not know where it comes from and where it goes. So is everyone who has been born of the Spirit. And Nicodemus answered and said, How is it possible for this to take place? Think about this. Nicodemus, the teacher of teachers, is talking to Yeshua. And Yeshua says, Hey, unless you're born of the Spirit, then you're not going to understand this. And Nicodemus is like, How could this be? And Yeshua says, Are you the teacher of Israel and you do not know this? Remember, Paul said, those in Timothy, he said, those teaching the Torah, but they don't know. They don't even know what they're teaching about. And Yeshua says, You're the teacher of the Israel and you don't know about this? 11, truly I say to you, we speak what we know and witness what we've seen and you do not receive our witness. If you do not believe when I spoke to you about earthly matters, how are you ever going to believe when I speak to you about heavenly matters? So Paul says, if I am in the flesh, I'm confused. I'm lost. If I'm in the Spirit, then I'm good. I have understanding. I have truth. I have wisdom. I have guidance. I have knowledge. So Yeshua asked Nicodemus, I'm talking to you about earthly things and you have no idea. Then how can I talk to you about heavenly things, about spiritual things? You'll have no idea. You'll be so lost. And this is where Paul's some men need milk and some men can, or women can do meat, right? Which we'll get into later. Last thing, and then we're all done. This is the last slide. Paul says, we do not need to be worried about genealogies. We do not need to be worried about who our father is and who our mother is. We need to be worried about being born of the flesh or born of the Spirit, not of the flesh. And Peter agrees with that. He says, therefore, having girded up the loins of your mind, being sober, set your expectation perfectly upon the favor that is to be brought to you in the revelation of Yeshua Messiah. As obedient children, not conforming yourselves to the former lusts in your ignorance. Instead, as the one who has called you is set apart, you should also become set apart in all behavior. Because it is written, Be set apart, for I am set apart. And if you call on the Father, who without partiality judges according to each one's work, pass the time of your sojourning in fear, knowing that you were redeemed from your futile way of life inherited from your fathers, not with what is corruptible, silver and gold, The physical inheritance at this point means nothing. Our promise, like Paul says, our promise. Yitzhak came of the promise. Isaac came of the promise, not of the flesh, of the promise. We are being redeemed from that, right? 19. But with the precious blood of the Messiah, as of a lamb unblemished and spotless, foreknown indeed before the foundations of the world, but manifested in these times for our sakes. Who, through him, belief in Elohim, who raised him from the dead and gave him esteem, so that your belief and expectation are in Elohim. Now that you have cleansed your lives, clean heart, in obeying the truth through the Spirit. So when Paul says, what's the reason for you keeping Torah? What's the reason for your circumcision? What's the reason for this? What's the reason for that? Is it because of your belief in Yeshua the Messiah, expectation in the Father and the Son, and obeying the truth because of the Spirit? To unfeigned brotherly love, love one another fervently with a clean heart, having been born again. There it is again. Not of corruptible seed, but incorruptible, through the living word of Elohim, which remains forever. Because all flesh is as grass, and the esteem of man and the flower as of grass. The grass withers, the flower falls away, but the word of Elohim remains forever. And this is the word announced as good news unto you. So, I didn't make any questions or wrap up slides, but we have to ask ourselves, is Paul preaching a different God? Is he teaching against the Torah? Is he contradicting the Torah? Is Paul talking about a different gospel? Is he talking about a different Messiah? Or is Paul talking about what is our reasons for these things? If my reason to get married was because of my love for this woman, then that marriage is most likely a honest and true marriage. If I get married to a woman because that's just what happened, Leah and Jacob, by happenstance, well, then is that marriage true? Is there love in that household? Will that be a strong, good marriage? Or will your eyes, the man's eyes, drift away to another woman? He says, for I've loved Rachel. And he wanted Rachel, for he loved her. But he didn't love Leah. He didn't love Bilhah. He didn't love Zilpah. He didn't love the handmaids. So is Paul talking about a different God? Or is he talking about the same one? Okay, and that wraps up Galatians. So as is stated next week, I'm going to stop the screen sharing. So as we go into next week will be a Passover study. We're going to go over the Passover, its entirety, and the week after that is an off week. Oh, oh. Which, if you have a calendar, you can see it, or if you don't have a calendar, you can go on the website and look. I know that was a lot, but is there any questions or comments or anything? All right. I'll end the recording.